Today's chemists work in clean labs with safety equipment. They follow strict rules to avoid danger. Medieval chemical workers had none of these protections. They mixed deadly substances with bare hands, risking their life daily. Tonight we explore something that will make you grateful for every safety rule ever written. We're talking about medieval alchemists. Alchemy isn't magic. We are not stirring up health potions. Alchemy is more like stirring up drugs with a death wish. Forget every romantic idea you have about medieval chemical workers, those wise old men in flowing robes with mysterious smoke around their labs, pure fantasy. The reality is different. You're probably half mad and slowly dying from metal poisoning. You can't remember what day it is. Your body is covered in chemical burns. One bad mixture could create poison gas in your basement. So prepare yourself. We're about to enter the toxic hell of medieval chemical work. Before we begin, make sure to tell us where you're listening from. I always love to see how history connects us from all around the world. Let me transport you back in time to experience this nightmare firsthand. Close your eyes and imagine waking up in a world where death lurks in every breath you take, every surface you touch, and every meal you consume. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1348. A deadly disease called the Black Death is killing 1 in 3 people across Europe. You've chosen perhaps the most dangerous job possible during the most dangerous time in human history. You're not just risking the plague, you're volunteering to be slowly murdered by your own workspace. You thought medieval farmers had it rough. At least they died quickly from hunger or disease. You've signed up for a slow, painful death by chemical poisoning, and you're paying for the privilege. Every breath you take is contaminated. Every surface you touch is deadly. Every meal you eat contains substances that would make modern safety experts run screaming. Your neighbors think you're either a genius or a demon. The church leaders think you're probably both. Your body is quietly filing a complaint against your life choices, one blackened fingernail at a time. Welcome to medieval chemical work. The only thing more toxic than your laboratory is your life expectancy. The morning light barely filters through the cracks in your wooden shutters as you prepare to face another day in this chemical hell. Your bones ache from sleeping on straw that's been contaminated with the same toxins that fill your working space. As you gather the strength to rise, you realize you must descend into the very heart of your operation, the place where all your deadly work takes place. You stumble down wooden stairs into what can only be described as a medieval drug lab. Someone who actively hates human survival designed this place. Your laboratory is actually a cramped cellar, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet. Stone walls weep moisture. The ceiling is so low you must duck to avoid hanging bundles of dried herbs. There are no windows down here. None. Whole. The only light comes from a few dying candles and the strange glow of your furnace. This has been burning all night. Medieval chemical workers didn't believe in fire safety. They didn't care about burning down the entire neighborhood. The air is thick enough to chew. It's a toxic soup of sulfur gas, liquid metal vapor, and something that might be arsenic, or it could be the ghost of your last helper. You've been sleeping on a straw mattress shoved into the corner, maybe 3 feet from your bubbling pots and actively poisonous experiments. This isn't because you're dedicated to your work. It's because you literally can't afford 2 rooms. Also because you're slowly going insane from metal poisoning. You no longer have the judgment to realize that sleeping next to a chemistry lab is a bad idea. The smell hits you like a physical force. Imagine opening a jar of rotten eggs that's been sitting in a sulfur pit, then add the metallic taste of blood and the sharp bite of acid. Now imagine that smell has been concentrated and aged in a sealed underground chamber for months. That's your morning wake-up call. Your furnace is the centerpiece of your operation. It's a medieval horror show, basically a brick oven that burns coal at temperatures hot enough to melt copper. There's no air system beyond hope the smoke finds a way out. The bellows you use to keep it going are made of leather. They've been treated with unknown chemicals. Every time you pump air into the fire, you're breathing whatever was used to preserve the animal hide. Around the furnace, your equipment is arranged with careful precision. You've given up on living past 40. Clay pots bubble with unknown liquids. Glass containers hold solutions that would make modern chemists weep. Some are bright green, others deep purple. A few are colors that shouldn't exist in nature. The floor is dirt. Stone is expensive, and wood would have rotted away from constant chemical spills. This dirt has absorbed decades of liquid metal, lead, acids, and experimental compounds. It's not soil anymore. It's a toxic record of every failed experiment, every spill, every time someone's helper knocked over a container and ran away screaming. As you move through this toxic environment, the full extent of what this work has done to your body becomes impossible to ignore. Each movement reminds you of the price you're paying for your pursuit of chemical secrets. Your own flesh has become a testament to the dangers that surround you. You look down at your hands. They tell the story of a man in a long losing battle with dangerous chemicals. Your fingers are stained permanent yellow-brown from sulfur compounds. Black crescents under your fingernails will never come clean. These aren't dirt stains. This is your skin, changed at the molecular level. Your palms are a map of chemical burns, old and new. Some scars are white and raised, souvenirs from that time you spilled royal water on yourself. Others are angry red welts from yesterday's encounter with quicklime. Your fingerprints have been literally burned away in places. Smooth, shiny scar tissue has replaced them. It will never grow back. You try to remember the last time your hands didn't hurt. Was it months ago? Years? The constant low-level burn has become so normal. You only notice it when you accidentally touch something clean. You walk to the small, cracked mirror, propped against the wall. The reflection stares back. It's a study in slow-motion self-destruction. Your hair, once brown, is now streaked with premature grey and white. Not the distinguished silver of age. This is the brittle, lifeless grey of metal poisoning. Entire patches have fallen out. You look like you've been struck by lightning. Your scalp itches constantly, not the normal itch of an unwashed head. This is the deep, maddening itch of hair roots that have been chemically burned. You scratch. White flakes fall like toxic snow onto your stained robes. Some might be dandruff. Most is probably dead skin cells, killed by constant exposure to heavy metals. Your face tells an even worse story. The left side, where you typically lean over your experiments, is marked with tiny scars from acid splashes. Your left eye waters constantly. This started last month and hasn't stopped. The whites have a yellowish tint that speaks of liver damage. Sometimes you see halos around candlelight. These definitely aren't holy visions. Your teeth are stained black from liquid metal exposure. Medieval tooth care was already a horror show, but you've made it worse by gargling with chemical solutions and breathing toxic smoke all day. Your gums have pulled back so far that your teeth look like tiny white tombstones in a graveyard of diseased flesh. The metallic taste in your mouth is permanent now. You've tried everything, chewing mint leaves, rinsing with wine, even gargling with milk. Nothing works. The taste of copper and lead has become part of your daily experience. You've forgotten what food actually tastes like. Everything has the flavor of coins and regret. The gnawing in your stomach reminds you that despite all the poison coursing through your system, your body still demands sustenance. But in your world, the simple act of eating has become another form of chemical warfare against yourself. Every meal is a calculated risk that might push you closer to the edge. You've managed to peel yourself off your metal-soaked straw mattress. You survived your morning ritual of chemical roulette. Now your stomach is growling like an angry dragon. Time for breakfast. Except in your world, every meal is a potential suicide attempt disguised as food. Welcome to dining as a medieval chemical worker. Your food is contaminated before it even reaches your mouth. Let's start with the obvious problem. Your hands. Those same fingers that just spent the morning touching chunks of arsenic are now reaching for your bread. You've been grinding red metal ore into powder, stirring molten lead. There's no soap that can wash away the metallic death embedded under your fingernails. You're basically seasoning your breakfast with a cocktail of brain-destroying substances. Your typical morning meal consists of whatever bread you can afford, which isn't much. You've spent your last silver coins on a bottle of royal water. It promised to dissolve gold, but mostly just dissolved your hopes and dreams. The bread is hard and stale. Now it's thoroughly contaminated with whatever chemical residue has taken up permanent residence on your skin. Every bite is like playing Russian roulette with your digestive system. But wait, it gets worse. Your water supply isn't just the regular medieval nightmare of bacteria and tiny worms. No, yours is special. You've been dumping your failed experiments into the same well everyone else draws from. That yellow tint in your morning water, that's not rust. That's the antimony and sulfur compound you threw out last week. It failed to produce the magical stone, and instead created something that smelled like the devil's armpit. The irony is delicious. Literally, you're searching for the elixir of life while slowly poisoning yourself with every sip of water. Your neighbors think you're brilliant, a learned man communing with the mysteries of creation. They don't know you're basically operating a medieval poison site in your backyard. Your breakfast porridge is a masterpiece of accidental chemistry. The grain was stored in your laboratory. That's the only dry space you have. It's been breathing in lead fumes and liquid metal vapor. Each spoonful is fortified with enough heavy metals to kill a horse. You're not eating breakfast. You're conducting a poison test on yourself. And the taste? Everything tastes metallic now. Your taste buds have been so thoroughly poisoned that you can't tell if your food is actually spoiled. That bitter aftertaste isn't the rye bread going bad. It's the arsenic you've been absorbing through your skin, your lungs, and now your breakfast. After choking down your toxic breakfast, you must prepare yourself for the day ahead. But even the simple act of getting dressed has become another layer of danger in your already hazardous existence. Your clothes aren't just garments, they're wearable monuments to every chemical disaster you've survived. Now that you've successfully poisoned yourself with breakfast, it's time to get dressed. Your clothes aren't just garments, they're wearable poison disasters waiting to happen. Your chemical workers' robes are your trademark, your professional uniform, your slow-acting death shroud. These aren't just clothes, they're fabric libraries documenting every chemical spill, every toxic splash, every failed experiment you've ever attempted. That brown stain on your left sleeve, hold, that's from when you spilled royal water last month. It's still eating through the fabric, and probably your arm. Let's start with the basics. You have one robe, because cloth is expensive, and you've spent all your money on chemical ingredients. They promise eternal life but deliver temporary death. This single garment has been with you through every experiment, every explosion, every toxic cloud that's emerged from your laboratory. The fabric itself is a masterpiece of medieval textile technology, which means it's basically woven straw held together with hope and animal fat, wool, if you're lucky, linen, if you're not. Either way, it's full of holes. It's designed to soak up every toxic chemical you've ever worked with. It's like wearing a sponge that's been marinated in death. Remember, there's no such thing as waterproof fabric in your time. No synthetic materials that can resist chemical damage. Your robe is made from sheep's wool. Sheep were definitely not evolved to handle liquid metal vapor and sulfuric acid. Every fiber is a tiny reservoir of toxic substances. They slowly release poison with every movement. The color of your robe tells the story of your work. Originally, it might have been brown or gray, the colors of humility and scholarly pursuit. Now it's a rainbow of chemical stains. Green from copper compounds, yellow from sulfur, red from red metal ore, blue from whatever that failed experiment was that almost took your eyebrows off. You look like a walking tie-dye disaster. If tie-dye were made with substances that could kill you, properly dressed in your toxic uniform, you're ready to face the true heart of your operation. The laboratory awaits, and with it, another day of dancing with death in the pursuit of impossible dreams. Every step toward your workspace brings you closer to the equipment and processes that are slowly killing you. Now that you've survived breakfast without dying from lead poisoning, it's time to head to your workshop, your laboratory, your temple of transformation, or as it's more accurately known, your custom-built death trap with a chemistry problem. Welcome to the medieval chemical workers' laboratory. Every surface wants to kill you. Every experiment is a potential funeral. Forget the clean, sterile labs of modern science. Your workspace is a cramped, windowless stone chamber. It doubles as a storage room, torture chamber, and occasionally, crematorium. The centerpiece of your lab is your furnace, a massive stone contraption that burns hotter than hell and twice as dangerous. There's no temperature control, no safety shutoff, no fire extinguisher hanging nearby, just you, some bellows, and the hope that today isn't the day it explodes. Sometimes that includes your own hair, when you lean too close while feeding the flames. Your equipment is a museum of hazardous materials, distillation devices made of lead, because glass is expensive, and lead is plentiful. Never mind that lead leaches into everything you distill. It slowly poisons you with every experiment. Your measuring cups are pewter. Your storage containers are lead-lined. Your stirring tools are crafted from the same metal that's quietly destroying your nervous system. Liquid metal is everywhere, in your thermometers, in your experiments, pooled in corners where it's spilled and never properly cleaned up. You handle it with your bare hands because gloves are for the weak. Besides, how dangerous could a little liquid metal be? The answer, extremely, but you won't know that for another few centuries. The air in your laboratory is a toxic soup. Sulfur gas from your experiments burns your lungs with every breath. Arsenic dust coats every surface, a fine white powder that gets into your food, your water, your clothes. Lead fumes rise from your furnace. Liquid metal vapor hangs in the air like an invisible assassin. You work in this atmosphere for 12 hours a day, breathing death with every breath. But your laboratory can't function without raw materials, and obtaining these substances requires venturing into a world even more dangerous than your toxic workshop. The ingredients you need don't come from respectable merchants. They come from the dark corners of medieval commerce, where death dealers trade in substances that would terrify even the most hardened criminals. You've survived the laboratory explosions and the metal poisoning, but now comes the real test of your sanity. You need ingredients, and in medieval chemical work, ingredients don't come from a supply catalogue. They come from places that would make modern chemists call the authorities. Let's start with the basics. You need liquid metal, lots of it. This mercury is essential for almost every chemical process, from creating the magical stone to transforming base metals into gold. But liquid metal doesn't grow on trees. It comes from red ore mines. Those mines are controlled by people who would happily cut your throat for a few silver coins. You travel to the mountains of Spain, the hills where red metal ore deposits run deep underground. The miners who extract it are slowly dying from metal poisoning. Their hands shake, their teeth fall out, their minds gradually dissolve. But they're also your only source. You negotiate with cutthroats and criminals, trading precious metals for chunks of red ore that will eventually kill you both. The journey itself is dangerous. Medieval roads are hunting grounds for bandits. They know that chemical workers carry valuable materials. You disguise yourself as a merchant, hiding your true purpose. But the smell of sulfur and metal that clings to your clothes gives you away. You're robbed twice before reaching the mines. You lose money you can't afford and narrowly escape with your life. But liquid metal is the easy part. The real challenge comes when you need human materials. Medieval chemical work isn't just about metals and minerals. It's about the essence of life itself. And that means human bodies. You need human blood for your experiments. Fresh blood, preferably from a healthy young person. You can't exactly put up a sign advertising your needs, so you turn to the black market. Barber surgeons double as the closest thing to doctors available. They sometimes sell you blood from their bloodletting procedures. It's usually contaminated with disease, but it's human. That's what matters. Sometimes you need more than blood. You need organs. A human heart for experiments involving the seat of life. A brain for investigations into consciousness. Kidneys for studies on purification. This means dealing with body snatchers, criminals who prowl graveyards at night. They dig up fresh corpses to sell to people like you. The transaction happens in a tavern after midnight. You sit in a corner booth, hood pulled up, waiting for your contact. He arrives carrying a sack that reeks of death and decay. Inside are the organs you requested, blackened with rot, crawling with maggots, but still identifiable. You pay without looking too closely. You try not to breathe through your nose. With your grisly supplies secured, you return to your laboratory to continue your work. But your isolation doesn't last long. Word of your abilities spreads through the medieval world like wildfire, and soon desperate people begin arriving at your door. They come seeking miracles, but what they find is a man slowly dying from his own experiments, dispensing hope wrapped in deadly chemicals. You've survived the laboratory explosions and the metal poisoning, but now comes the real test of your sanity, dealing with customers. Because nothing says professional consultation like a desperate noble threatening to have you hanged. If your immortality potion doesn't work by Thursday, your workshop door creaks open. In walks trouble, not the explosive kind you're used to, the human kind. The kind that pays your bills and might also get you executed. Welcome to medieval customer service. The customer is always right, always desperate, always completely insane. First through your door is Lord Bertram. He's a walking illustration of what happens when too much money meets too little brain. His gut strains against silk clothes. His breath reeks of wine and rotting teeth. His eyes hold the manic gleam of a man convinced he can cheat death with the right recipe. He's heard whispers, he says, leaning close enough that you can smell his festering gums. Whispers about the magical stone, the elixir of life, the secret to eternal youth. I need to live forever, he announces, as if ordering a loaf of bread. My enemies are plotting. My heir is an idiot. My wife is younger than my boots, and twice as expensive. I cannot die. Not yet. You explain carefully that immortality isn't exactly available. Your work focuses on medicine and metalworking, maybe some mild life extension if the planets align correctly. He cuts you off with a wave of his jeweled hand. Nonsense. I've heard the stories. The Count, who hasn't aged in decades. You chemical workers have the secret. I'll pay whatever it takes. The payment he offers could feed your family for years. The alternative, he suggests with a meaningful glance at his sword, is considerably less appealing. So you nod, you take his gold. You begin crafting what will essentially be the medieval equivalent of expensive fake medicine. Your immortality elixir is a mixture of liquid metal, sulfur, ground pearls, and enough exotic spices to mask the taste of impending organ failure. You package it in a crystal bottle, you mumble some impressive Latin phrases, you hand it over with stern warnings about proper dosing and planetary alignments. 3 weeks later, Lord Bertram is dead from metal poisoning. His family blames an enemy's curse. You blame stupidity, but you keep the gold. Next comes a parade of peasants, each more desperate than the last. They've heard rumors, whispers in taverns, stories of chemical workers who can turn lead into gold, who can make a man rich with just the right formula. They arrive at your door clutching copper coins and silver-plated hope. Please, master, begs Martha. A farmer's wife whose husband lost his leg to a plough accident. Just a small transformation. Turn this pewter cup into gold, enough to buy land, to feed our children through winter. You explain patiently that transformation isn't like baking bread. It requires rare materials, perfect conditions.
Years of preparation. She nods eagerly. She's convinced you're describing the process rather than dismissing her request.
I can wait, she says. I can bring you liquid metal, sulfur, whatever you need. My neighbor's cousin knows a man who might have saltpeter. The desperation in her eyes is worse than any torture device. So you take her meager coins, you give her a brass pendant treated with thin gold wash. You tell her to bury it under the full moon for 7 nights. By the time she realizes it's not transforming into solid gold, she'll be too embarrassed to admit she fell for medieval trickery. But the worst customers are the physicians. These are men who've studied at universities, who understand anatomy and disease, who should know better. Yet they arrive at your workshop with the same wild-eyed desperation as everyone else. I need a universal cure, demands Master Geoffrey. A physician whose reputation depends on curing ailments that have no cure, something that works on everything. Plague, consumption, fever, melancholy, women's troubles. My patients are dying despite my best efforts. His best efforts involve bloodletting until the patient faints, purging with liquid metal until their bowels dissolve, prescribing prayers for conditions that might actually be treatable. But he's convinced that somewhere in your bubbling apparatus lies the secret to medical perfection. You craft him a tincture of alcohol, herbs, and just enough opium to make dying patients feel better temporarily. You call it water of life, and charge him enough to make it seem precious. Within months, half his patients are dead from alcohol poisoning. The other half are addicted to opium, but the families praise him for the peaceful deaths. He orders more. The problem with medieval medicine isn't just that it doesn't work, it actively kills people. Everyone involved pretends this is normal. You're not practicing medicine, you're participating in an elaborate suicide cult with fancy Latin names. Welcome to medieval customer service. The client is always wrong, always dying, always blaming someone else when your miracle cures turn out to be expensive poison. The only thing worse than having no customers is having too many. Each one brings you closer to the day when someone important dies from your treatments. Then you get to experience medieval justice firsthand. You think the worst part of being a medieval metalworker is the poison and exploding customers. Then you hear 3 words that freeze your blood. The religious police approach. Because nothing says science progress like being burned alive for asking questions about how the world works. The year is 1450. The Catholic Church has decided that curiosity is a sin, not just any sin, but the kind that needs public correction through fire and screaming. Your crime, trying to understand God's creation through watching and testing. The Church wants God's mysteries to stay mysterious. You bend over your glass tubes, carefully heating what you hope will be good cough medicine. Then Brother Thomas arrives at your door. He's not the friendly local monk who buys hangover cures. He wears the white robes of the religious order that hunts heretics. He carries a leather bag that doesn't contain friendly letters. His eyes shine with the look of a man who thinks he saves souls by destroying bodies. Master metalworker, he says. The way he says metalworker makes it sound like a disease. I've come to discuss your work. Your work, as if changing base metals and studying matter is like sacrificing goats under the full moon. Brother Thomas pulls out a scroll from his bag. He unfolds it with dramatic flair. He's practiced this scene many times. He begins reading charges. You have been seen creating strange vapors and unnatural lights in your workshop. You own books written in Arabic and Hebrew, languages of the non-believers. You seek to change God's creation, altering the natural order he made. And most damning of all, you claim to create life itself through your experiments. That last one is ridiculous. You've never claimed to create life. You've barely managed to create working medicine. But someone saw you mixing ingredients in a flask. They watched the chemical reaction. They decided you were competing with the Creator. The problem isn't just that the church disapproves of your work. They truly believe you're working with Satan. In their minds, there's no other explanation. How else can you transform one substance into another? How else can you create fire from liquid? How else can you make healing compounds from unrelated materials? Obviously, you've made a deal with the devil. These practices, Brother Thomas continues, are forbidden by Holy Scripture and church teachings. The pursuit of hidden knowledge, the attempt to go beyond human limits, the use of occult symbols and foreign texts, these are the tools of heretics and witches. You try to explain that your work is natural philosophy. You're studying God's creation to better understand his wisdom. You mention that many church fathers have written favorably about metalworking studies. Brother Thomas is not impressed. Religious scholars warned against the dangers of such knowledge, he replies. They wrote that while natural philosophy might be acceptable, seeking supernatural powers through artificial means is inherently sinful, and your experiments clearly venture into the supernatural. The supernatural, because understanding that certain minerals produce specific reactions when heated is like summoning demons. You're not practicing magic, you're practicing chemistry that won't be properly understood for another 3 centuries. But explaining scientific method to a medieval religious investigator is like explaining advanced mathematics to a farm animal. They're not interested in logic or evidence, they're interested in maintaining religious order. Your bubbling flasks represent dangerous chaos. Brother Thomas produces a second scroll. This one contains specific accusations from your neighbors. Someone reported seeing green flames in your workshop, obviously demonic fire, not copper compounds burning. Another witness claims you spoke in tongues while working. You were actually cursing in Arabic because you couldn't read the recipe properly. Context doesn't matter during heresy trials. Most damning of all, young Sister Margaret at the local convent has been having visions. Visions of a bearded man in a smoke-filled chamber. He consorts with dark spirits and brews potions that corrupt the faithful. The description matches you perfectly, down to the singed eyebrows and permanent chemical stains on your hands. These visions, Brother Thomas explains, are clearly sent by God to warn us of evil in our midst. Sister Margaret has never seen your workshop, yet she describes it in perfect detail. How do you explain such divine revelation? You want to explain that Sister Margaret probably heard gossip from other nuns. Medieval convents are centers of rumor and hysteria. Religious visions are often medieval therapy for bored, repressed women. Instead, you nod respectfully and try to look sorry. The real problem isn't just the church's opposition to your work. They have all the power, all the legal authority, and no interest in distinguishing between genuine heresy and scientific curiosity. To them, any attempt to understand natural phenomena without church approval is suspect. The penalties for heresy aren't light punishments. They're creative, public, and designed to discourage others from similar pursuits. To burning is the classic choice. All but the religious investigators have developed a rich variety of alternatives, drawing and quartering for particularly offensive cases, slow strangling for those who take back their words, and for the truly stubborn extended torture until you confess to whatever they want to hear. Brother Thomas describes the process with the enthusiasm of a man discussing his favorite recipe. First, you'll be taken to the church court for formal questioning. If you confess immediately and reject your heretical practices, you might escape with public penance and the destruction of your equipment. If you maintain your innocence, you'll be subjected to enhanced questioning until you see reason. The enhanced questioning involves tools with names like the rack, the wheel, and the rope pull. Medieval torture devices aren't just instruments of pain. They're carefully designed to extract confessions while keeping the victim alive long enough to be publicly executed. It's a process that can take weeks. The religious investigators have perfected it through centuries of practice. Of course, Brother Thomas adds with what might be kindness, if you cooperate fully, reject your practices, and provide information about other practitioners in the region, the church can be merciful. Perhaps exile instead of execution. Perhaps a quick death instead of a slow one. Information about other practitioners, because the religious investigators don't just want to stop you, they want to stop everyone like you. Every metal worker, every natural philosopher, every person who dares to ask questions about how the world works. They're not just burning individuals, they're burning curiosity itself. You realize, standing in your workshop surrounded by the equipment that represents years of work and study, that you're facing a choice. You can abandon everything. Destroy your books and equipment, spend the rest of your life pretending that scientific curiosity is sinful. Or you can run, hide, and try to continue your work in secret, while constantly looking over your shoulder for white robes and burning stakes. Either way, the age of open inquiry is over. The church has decided that some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue. They're willing to kill anyone who disagrees. You're not just a medieval metal worker anymore. You're a refugee from intellectual freedom, hiding in the shadows of a world that fears understanding more than ignorance. Brother Thomas rolls up his scrolls and prepares to leave. You have 3 days to consider your position, he says. Choose wisely. The church prefers repentance to martyrdom, but we're prepared for either outcome. 3 days. 3 days to decide whether to abandon everything you've worked for or become a fugitive from organized religion. 3 days to realize that in medieval Europe, the pursuit of knowledge isn't just dangerous, it's a death sentence waiting to be carried out by men who believe ignorance is a virtue. Welcome to the religious investigation problem, where asking questions is heresy, understanding is suspicion, and the only safe knowledge is the knowledge the church approves, and they don't approve of much. As the white-robed figure disappears down the cobblestone street, you stand in your doorway watching the last of your former life walk away. The workshop behind you suddenly feels different. What once represented hope and discovery now feels like evidence of crimes you didn't know you were committing. But even as fear grips your chest, another emotion burns just as strongly, the crushing weight of impending financial ruin. So you've managed to survive the toxic fumes, the religious persecution, and the constant threat of being labeled a heretic. Congratulations. Now comes the part that will truly destroy you, the money. Because being a medieval metal worker isn't just about slowly poisoning yourself in a basement laboratory, it's about going spectacularly broke while doing it. Let's start with your equipment budget. Remember that fancy distillation device you needed? That cost you roughly what a peasant makes in 3 years. The glass alone had to be imported from Venice. It was shipped across dangerous trade routes. It was handled by craftsmen who charged premium prices because they knew you had no choice. One crack, one poorly timed earthquake, one clumsy assistant, and there goes your life savings in a shower of expensive broken pieces. But wait, there's more. You need crucibles made from the finest clay, sealed with rare minerals. You need furnaces built to precise specifications. You need bellows that cost more than most people's homes. You need scales so delicate they can measure the weight of a feather. Every tool, every vessel, every piece of equipment represents months of saving, begging, or selling family heirlooms. And the materials. Oh, the materials. Red mercury ore from distant mines, antimony from unknown places, rare earths that cost more per ounce than a knight's warhorse. You're not just buying ingredients, you're funding international trade networks. That vial of mercury you desperately need. It's traveled farther than most people will in their entire lives. Every middleman along the way has added their markup. You're running a medieval startup with venture capital that expires the moment you fail to turn lead into gold. Speaking of failure, let's talk about your investors. Nobody funds metal working out of the goodness of their hearts. Your patrons, usually wealthy nobles or ambitious merchants, aren't investing in science. They're gambling on magic. They expect returns, and they expect them fast. You promised the Duke you'd have gold flowing like water within 6 months. It's been 2 years. All you've produced is a collection of colorful powders and a persistent cough that sounds like a dying goose. The Duke is not amused. His patience has worn thinner than gold leaf on his decorated manuscripts. Those monthly payments that kept you fed and housed, they've stopped. Your workshop rent, overdue. Your assistants, gone because you can't pay them. They're tired of working for a man who talks to himself and occasionally sets his eyebrows on fire. But the financial bleeding doesn't stop there. You've borrowed against your future success. You've used your family's property as collateral. You've sold your father's sword, your mother's jewelry, and that nice set of books you inherited from your uncle. Every failed experiment costs you not just materials but credibility.
Oh.
And in the medieval world, credibility is currency. Your social status has plummeted faster than a stone from a castle tower. You were once elevated by your mysterious knowledge and scholarly reputation. The local merchants who once sought your advice now cross the street when they see you coming. Your former peers in the scholarly community whisper about your peculiar obsessions and unnatural pursuits. You've become that guy, the one who used to be respectable before he lost his mind chasing impossible dreams. The worst part? You can't even get a regular job anymore. Your hands are stained with chemicals. Your reputation is ruined. Your health is shot. Who's going to hire a man who smells like sulfur and occasionally breaks into fits of mercury-induced trembling? Your specialized knowledge is worthless in the practical world. You know 17 different ways to combine metals, but you can't shoe a horse or fix a broken plow. You're overqualified for manual labor and underqualified for anything that requires trust. Meanwhile, your competitors, the few metal workers who haven't completely destroyed their lives yet, are whispering to your former patrons. They're promising faster results, better processes, more reliable outcomes. They're younger, healthier, and they haven't yet reached the point where they mutter to themselves while stirring bubbling cauldrons. Your former clients are jumping ship faster than rats fleeing a burning granary. Here's the cruel irony. The closer you get to bankruptcy, the more desperate your experiments become. You start cutting corners, using cheaper materials, taking bigger risks. That expensive safety equipment you used to insist on can't afford it anymore. Those careful procedures that kept you from blowing yourself up, too time-consuming. When you're racing against creditors, you're spiraling into a feedback loop of desperation. Financial pressure forces you to work more dangerously. This leads to more failures. This destroys your reputation further. Your family, if they're still speaking to you, watches in horror as you sell everything they held dear to fund your obsession. Your wife, assuming she hasn't left you already, begs you to give up this madness and find honest work. Your children, if you have any, are ashamed to bear your name. You've become the cautionary tale other parents use to scare their kids away from book learning. The final insult? Even when you do occasionally produce something interesting, a new alloy, an improved process, a genuinely useful discovery, you can't profit from it. You don't own patents. You can't license your innovations. If you try to keep your methods secret, someone else will figure it out and claim credit. If you share your knowledge, you're just giving away the one thing that might have saved your financial situation. So there you sit, in your crumbling laboratory, surrounded by the expensive wreckage of your ambitions. You're broke, broken, and rapidly approaching the point where even the most generous patron wouldn't trust you with funding for a cup of ale. The pursuit of the impossible has made your life exactly that: impossible to sustain, impossible to escape, and impossible to justify to anyone with common sense. But financial ruin, devastating as it is, pales in comparison to the psychological prison that comes next. The paranoia that seeps into your bones like winter cold. The constant fear that transforms every shadow into a potential threat. Because in this world where knowledge is power, and power is dangerous, even your desperation must be hidden behind layers of deception and code. If poverty doesn't kill you, paranoia will. Because in the medieval world of metalworking, knowledge isn't just power, it's a death sentence waiting to be written. Every formula you discover, every process you develop, every tiny breakthrough you make must be hidden, coded, and disguised. Sometimes even you can't remember what you were trying to say. Welcome to the world of secret writing. A simple recipe for making soap looks like a demonic spell. You can't write heat mercury until it turns red because that would make sense. Making sense is dangerous. Instead, you write something like, when the white queen dances with the red king beneath the watchful eye of the green lion, let the marriage be completed in the fires of the dragon's breath. Anyone reading your notes would think you're either insane or writing terrible poetry. These aren't just cute comparisons, they're survival mechanisms. If the wrong person gets hold of your actual methods, you're finished. A church official might decide your formulas are demonic rituals. A competing metal worker might steal your work and claim it as their own. A former patron might use your secrets to blackmail you. So you write everything in symbols, stories, and references that only make sense if you already know what you're talking about. The problem is, This system is insane. You spend more time encoding your discoveries than making them. That breakthrough you had with antimony extraction, it takes you 3 hours to write it down in a way that won't get you burned at the stake, and God help you if you die suddenly. Your encrypted notes might as well be written in an alien language. Your life's work becomes an unsolvable puzzle that will frustrate scholars for centuries. But the secrecy goes deeper than just your notebooks. You can't trust anyone. Your assistants, they might be spies sent by competing metal workers. Your servants, they could be selling information to your enemies, your own family. They might accidentally reveal something that gets you investigated by the church. Every conversation is a potential betrayal. Every shared meal is a chance for someone to discover your secrets. You develop complex systems for testing loyalty. You feed different people, different false information. You watch to see which version comes back to you through the gossip network. You set traps in your laboratory, subtle markers that reveal if someone has been snooping through your equipment. You speak in code even when you're alone, just in case someone is listening through the walls. The isolation is maddening. You're working on the most exciting intellectual challenges of your time. You're making discoveries that could change the world, and you can't tell anyone about them. You solve a problem that's been puzzling natural philosophers for centuries. You have to celebrate alone in your laboratory, whispering your triumph to empty air. You're simultaneously the most knowledgeable person in your field, and the loneliest man in your city. Competition makes everything worse. There aren't many metal workers around, but the few who exist are locked in a constant war of spying and sabotage. You're not just competing for patrons and resources, you're competing for the right to exist. If another metal worker can discredit you, steal your methods, or expose your secrets, they eliminate a rival and strengthen their own position. It's academic politics with life or death stakes. You hear rumors about other metal workers' work, but you can never be sure what's true. Did Johannes really discover a new way to purify silver, or is that just false information designed to send you down a useless research path? Is that mysterious scholar in Prague actually making progress on the Philosopher's Stone, or is he just better at self-promotion than you are? The secrecy that protects you also blinds you to genuine advances in your field. Your patron relationships become exercises in careful manipulation. You have to demonstrate progress without revealing your methods. You have to show knowledge without teaching anything useful. You have to appear confident while constantly terrified that someone will expose your secrets. Every meeting is a performance where you're simultaneously the star and the prisoner. The worst part? The mercury you've been inhaling for years is starting to affect your mind. You're developing a tremor in your hands that makes writing difficult. Your memory is becoming unreliable. Sometimes you can't remember if you encoded a formula, or if you just forgot to write it down clearly. You're becoming genuinely paranoid, but you can't tell if your fears are justified or if they're symptoms of metal poisoning. You start seeing enemies everywhere. That merchant who asked too many questions about your work, obviously a spy. The new servant who seems unusually interested in your laboratory, definitely planted by a rival. The priest who complimented your scholarship, probably gathering evidence for a heresy trial. Your paranoia feeds on itself, growing stronger with each passing day. You're afraid to trust your own shadow. The terrible irony is that your secrecy is probably pointless. Most of your discoveries are dead ends anyway. The processes you're protecting so carefully don't actually work. The formulas you're encoding with such elaborate care produce nothing but expensive smoke and colorful failures. You're guarding secrets that aren't worth keeping. You're maintaining a conspiracy around knowledge that isn't actually knowledge. But you can't stop. The habits of secrecy have become so ingrained that you can't imagine living any other way. You encrypt your shopping lists. You speak in comparisons when asking for directions. You've forgotten how to have a normal conversation, because every interaction has become a potential security breach. In the end, the secrecy that was supposed to protect you becomes another prison. You're trapped not just by your failures, but by your inability to share them. You're isolated, not just by your work, but by your inability to explain it. You're dying not just from chemical poisoning, but from the psychological poison of absolute paranoia. Somewhere in your encoded notebooks, buried under layers of cryptic symbols and meaningless stories, lie the scattered fragments of a life spent in the shadows, a brilliant mind slowly dissolving in mercury and fear, leaving behind nothing but unsolvable riddles and the faint smell of sulfur in an empty room. Yet even as your mind fractures under the weight of secrecy and paranoia, your body continues its own relentless betrayal. Years of exposure to the very materials you've devoted your life to studying, have begun their final, inexorable assault on your physical form. The trembling hands that once seemed like mere nervousness now shake with the palsy of a man whose nervous system is slowly dissolving. So you've survived the explosions, dodged the religious investigators, and somehow scraped together enough coins to keep your laboratory from being repossessed by angry creditors. Congratulations. Now comes the part where your own experiments slowly murder you from the inside out, because in medieval metalworking, the real enemy isn't the church, or your neighbors, or even your empty purse. It's the metals you've been lovingly handling for years. Let's start with your hands. Those same fingers that once delicately measured powders and stirred solutions now shake like autumn leaves in a windstorm. You try to pour mercury into a flask. Your trembling hands send quicksilver bouncing across your work table like liquid panic. This isn't nervousness about your latest experiment. This is mercury poisoning. It's been building up in your system for months, maybe years. Mercury, that fascinating liquid metal that dances and splits and reforms like magic, has been your constant companion. You've heated it, mixed it, breathed its vapors, and occasionally spilled it on your skin. Medieval metalworkers called it quicksilver, and believed it was one of the fundamental principles of all matter. What they didn't know was that every vapor you inhaled was depositing microscopic amounts of poison directly into your brain. Your tremors start in your hands, but don't stop there. Soon your entire body becomes a symphony of involuntary movements. Your head nods without your permission. Your legs twitch while you sleep. Writing becomes impossible. Then holding a quill. Then even lifting a cup of watered wine to your lips. The medieval world has no word for brain damage, but that's exactly what's happening. Your nervous system is being systematically destroyed by the very element you thought would unlock the secrets of transformation. But mercury isn't working alone. Lead, that humble bendable metal you've been melting and reforming in your quest to understand base metals, has been quietly accumulating in your organs. Lead poisoning doesn't announce itself with dramatic symptoms. It creeps in like a thief, stealing your health one cell at a time. Your kidneys, those hard-working filters of medieval life, are slowly failing. You don't notice at first because there's no blood test, no medical understanding of kidney function. You just know that you're tired all the time. Your stomach cramps constantly. Your urine has taken on a disturbing dark color. The lead has been binding to your bones, replacing calcium. It's making your skeleton a repository of poison that will leak toxins into your bloodstream for the rest of your shortened life. Your digestive system rebels against you. The same stomach that once eagerly anticipated even the grimmest medieval meals now churns with constant nausea. Food tastes like ash. Your mouth has developed a strange metallic flavor that no amount of ale can wash away. This is the painter's colic that will plague artists for centuries. But you're experiencing it as a metal worker, and there's no one to explain why your body is betraying you. Then there's arsenic, that white powder you've been using in your attempts to create artificial gems and metallic alloys. Medieval metal workers prized arsenic compounds for their ability to create vivid colors and their supposed medicinal properties. What they didn't understand was that arsenic is one of nature's most efficient killers. It's been slowly accumulating in your hair, your nails, your skin. Arsenic poisoning is sneaky. It doesn't kill you quickly like a sword or a plague. Instead, it methodically destroys your body systems. Your skin develops dark patches and strange growths. Your hair falls out in clumps. Your fingernails develop white lines that medieval physicians might mistake for natural aging, but they're actually your body's desperate attempt to contain the poison. Your peripheral nerves begin to die. The sensation in your hands and feet fades. This makes your already difficult work nearly impossible. You drop tools not because of mercury tremors, but because you can't feel them in your numb fingers. Walking becomes uncertain. Your feet feel like they're wrapped in wool, disconnected from your conscious control. But perhaps the most disturbing symptoms are the ones happening in your mind. The line between scientific observation and hallucination begins to blur. Those vapors you've been inhaling during your experiments aren't just poisoning your body. They're creating chemical changes in your brain that medieval medicine interprets as divine visions or demonic possession. You begin to see things that aren't there. Faces in the flames of your furnace. Angelic figures hovering over your metalworking apparatus. The mercury in your latest experiment seems to whisper secrets in languages you don't recognize. In the 14th century, there's no understanding of brain toxicity or chemical-induced psychosis. These hallucinations are either gifts from God, temptations from the devil, or signs of your advancing wisdom. The worst part is that some of these visions seem to contain genuine insights. In your mercury-addled state, you make connections between different metalworking processes that actually work. You discover new ways to purify metals. You find new combinations that create unexpected results. This reinforces your belief that the hallucinations are meaningful, that your deteriorating mental state is actually a form of enlightenment. Your sleep becomes a battleground. The lead in your system causes vivid, terrifying dreams. You wake up screaming about demons trying to steal your secrets, about angels revealing the location of the philosopher's stone, about your own body dissolving into constituent elements. Your neighbors, already suspicious of your activities, begin to whisper about your midnight ravings. Memory becomes unreliable. You forget where you've hidden your notes, what ingredients you've added to which experiments, whether you've eaten today or yesterday. The mercury has begun to destroy the connections between your brain cells. This creates gaps in your cognition that you try to fill with increasingly elaborate theories about the nature of reality. Your vision starts to deteriorate. The lead poisoning affects your optic nerves, making fine work nearly impossible. You squint at your manuscripts, holding them close to your face. You try to make out the symbols and formulas you've spent years perfecting. Colors become muted. Shapes become unclear. The world begins to look like it's viewed through dirty glass. Physical coordination abandons you entirely. The combination of mercury tremors, lead-induced weakness, and arsenic nerve damage makes even simple tasks monumental challenges. Lighting a candle becomes a 10-minute ordeal. Measuring precise amounts of powder becomes guesswork. Your experiments, once models of careful procedure, become sloppy, dangerous affairs. They're as likely to poison you further as they are to reveal new knowledge. And through it all, you continue working. Because in your toxin-addled mind, each symptom is just another clue to the great mystery you're trying to solve. Your trembling hands aren't a sign of poisoning. They're your body's natural response to handling the fundamental forces of nature. Your hallucinations aren't brain damage. They're visions granted to those who dare to peer behind the veil of reality. You're not just practicing metalworking anymore. You're becoming a living experiment, a walking testament to the dangers of medieval science. Your body is a laboratory, and the results are consistently, catastrophically negative. But you don't know that. You can't know that. All you know is that the work must continue, even as it's slowly, systematically destroying you from the inside out. As the poisons accumulate and your physical symptoms worsen, something far more terrifying begins to happen. The boundary between your deteriorating body and your fragmenting mind starts to dissolve. What began as physical tremors and failing health transforms into something much more profound and frightening: the complete dissolution of your sense of self. Your mind, once sharp enough to decipher ancient texts and design complex experiments, has become a stranger to you. The mercury that's been accumulating in your brain tissue for months has finally reached critical mass. The psychological symptoms are no longer subtle whispers of confusion. They're screaming proclamations of madness that echo through your skull like voices in an empty cathedral. You wake up one morning and can't remember your own name, not just struggling to recall it, but genuinely uncertain if you've ever had one. The face in your polished metal mirror looks familiar but foreign, like a distant relative you met once at a wedding. Your reflection's eyes hold a wild, desperate gleam that medieval physicians would recognize as the mark of someone whose bodily humors have fallen into dangerous imbalance. The mercury has begun to destroy your ability to form new memories while leaving your distant past crystal clear. You can recite entire passages from texts you read as a young apprentice, but you can't remember whether you ate yesterday or last week. Time becomes fluid, meaningless. Minutes stretch into hours. Days compress into heartbeats. You start experiments and find them half-finished, with no memory of beginning them. Your personality, that core sense of self that survived childhood diseases, social persecution, and financial ruin, begins to fragment. The careful, methodical scholar who once approached each experiment with scientific rigor is replaced by someone manic, impulsive, and increasingly dangerous. You laugh at inappropriate moments. You weep without cause. You fly into rages over imagined slights from your long-dead master. The isolation that once protected you from persecution now becomes a prison of your own making. You've spent so many years hiding from neighbors, avoiding social contact, and working in solitude that you've forgotten how to interact with other human beings. When the baker's wife asks about your health, you launch into a rambling explanation. You explain how base metals yearn to become gold, how everything in the universe is connected by invisible threads of sympathy and antipathy. Your speech becomes erratic, peppered with metalworking jargon that sounds like gibberish to ordinary people. You refer to yourself in the third person, as if you're observing your own life from outside your body. The seeker of truth must not rest, you mutter while sorting through your dwindling supplies. The vessel must be purified before the great work can begin. People start crossing themselves when they see you coming. The boundary between your experiments and your daily life dissolves completely. You taste your morning porridge and detect traces of sulfur. You examine your own urine for signs of metallic transformation. You become convinced that your body is undergoing its own chemical process, that the tremors and hallucinations are signs of your successful transformation from base human to something more refined. Your obsession with the philosopher's stone evolves from scientific curiosity to religious mania. You're no longer trying to discover the secret of transformation. You're convinced that you are the secret, that your poisoned, failing body is the crucible in which the great work is being completed. Every symptom becomes a sacred sign. Every hallucination becomes a divine revelation. Sleep becomes impossible, not because of physical discomfort, but because your mind refuses to quiet. Your thoughts race like mercury drops on a tilted surface, quick and unpredictable and impossible to contain. You lie in your straw bed, eyes wide open. You watch shadows dance on the walls and interpret their movements as messages from long-dead metal workers who've returned to guide your work. The mercury-induced psychosis creates a feedback loop of paranoia and grandiosity. You're simultaneously convinced that you're on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history, and that invisible enemies are trying to stop you. Your neighbor's innocent glances become evidence of conspiracy. The priest's Sunday sermon about the dangers of pride seems directed specifically at you. Even your own shadow appears to move independently, plotting against you. You begin to see patterns everywhere, connections that exist only in your damaged neural pathways. The number of stones in your courtyard corresponds to the atomic weight of gold. The pattern of cracks in your laboratory wall reveals the secret formula for the universal solvent. The way candlelight flickers during your experiments is actually a code, a celestial alphabet spelling out the names of angels who govern metallic transformation. Your remaining coins become sacred objects, not currency, but physical manifestations of the principles you're trying to understand. You arrange them in elaborate patterns, convinced that the proper geometric arrangement will spontaneously transform them into gold. You talk to them, pray over them, and eventually refuse to spend them because they're too important to your research. The line between genius and insanity, always thin in medieval scholarship, disappears entirely. Your insights become increasingly bizarre, but internally consistent. You develop elaborate theories about how human emotions can influence chemical reactions, how the phases of the moon affect the behavior of metals, how your own deteriorating health is actually a sign of your approaching spiritual transcendence. Writing becomes impossible, not because of the physical tremors, but because your thoughts move too quickly for your hands to follow. You start sentences that transform into entirely different ideas halfway through. Your notes become incomprehensible streams of consciousness. They mix metalworking formulas with personal observations about the taste of copper and the sound of silver singing in the crucible. Your relationship with God becomes complicated and deeply personal. You're convinced that your suffering is a form of divine testing, that your madness is actually a higher form of understanding, granted only to those who dare to probe the deepest mysteries of creation. You pray constantly, not for healing, but for the strength to continue your work despite the obstacles your own body has become. The most frightening moments come when clarity briefly returns, when the chemical fog in your brain clears just enough for you to recognize what you've become. In these fleeting intervals, you see your shaking hands, your emaciated frame, your wild eyes. You understand that you're dying, but the clarity never lasts long enough for you to stop, to seek help, to save yourself. Instead, you interpret these moments of lucidity as proof that your methods are working, that you're achieving the spiritual purification necessary for the great work. The fact that you can still think, still reason, still conduct experiments, despite your obvious physical deterioration, becomes evidence of your approaching success, rather than your impending doom. Your final days are spent in a state of ecstatic delusion. You're convinced that you're on the verge of discovering the secret that has eluded metal workers for centuries. You talk to your apparatus as if it were alive. You thank your poisons for the visions they've granted you. You prepare for a transformation that will never come. In the end, you die not as a victim of medieval superstition or religious persecution, but as a casualty of your own relentless pursuit of knowledge. Your madness, terrible as it is, represents something tragically heroic. The willingness to sacrifice everything, including your own sanity, in the service of understanding. You are both the greatest success and the most complete failure of medieval science. A man who gave everything to unlock the secrets of nature and received only death in return. You have worked in your secret laboratory for 15 years. Something has gone terribly wrong with your mind. Your hands shake constantly. You forget simple things every day. These are just the beginning of your problems. The poisonous metal called mercury is slowly destroying your brain. People in your time period do not understand this danger. They think the silver liquid is magical and safe to touch. What you believe are messages from God are actually sickness symptoms. Your brain is being damaged by the toxic metals you handle every day. But you live in a time when people explain everything through religion and magic. You start seeing patterns that do not exist. The flames in your heating furnace seem to dance with meaning. The colors from heated metals look like communications from heaven. The sounds your equipment makes become whispers from ancient teachers. Your poisoned brain creates connections where none exist. Random events become signs from above. Coincidences transform into cosmic messages. You are losing your ability to think clearly. The isolation makes everything worse. You work alone in secret. No one can tell you when your ideas become strange. Your wife stopped trying to understand your work long ago. Other people who do this work live far away across Europe. You exist in a bubble of your own making. Every wild theory seems brilliant. There is no one left to say you are wrong. As the months pass, your condition deteriorates further. You develop what you call the wise man's sight. You believe you can see hidden connections between all things. In reality, you are having visual hallucinations. This is common when mercury poisons the brain. You see geometric patterns covering everything. Mathematical relationships seem to explain how the universe works. You spend hours drawing these visions. Your drawings look like the work of a mentally ill person. Your sleep becomes irregular. This is another symptom of metal poisoning. But you think it shows spiritual progress. You believe sleep blocks enlightenment. You stay awake for days at a time. Your already damaged brain slides deeper into madness. You have conversations with dead historical figures. You debate with angels. You receive detailed instructions from the spirits of deceased practitioners. The fact that these conversations happen only in your sick mind never occurs to you. The need to continue your work becomes overwhelming. Even when your hands shake too much to hold a writing tool, you cannot stop. Even when your memory fails completely, you must continue working. The mercury has created a cycle in your brain. Working with chemicals makes you crave more chemicals. You need your laboratory like a drunk person needs wine, but you interpret this addiction as a spiritual calling. Your theories become more elaborate and disconnected from reality. You convince yourself that you are about to discover the secret of creation itself. You create complex explanations for why your experiments keep failing. It is not because changing metals into gold is impossible. It is because the star positions are wrong, or because your spiritual preparation is not complete, or because you have not suffered enough to deserve the knowledge. The paranoia grows stronger. You become convinced that other practitioners are stealing your ideas through supernatural means. You develop elaborate protective rituals. You draw circles of salt around your workspace. You burn specific herbs to ward off psychic attacks. You create coded languages so complex that even you sometimes cannot understand them. Your laboratory becomes a fortress of madness. It is protected by rituals that exist only in your poisoned imagination. You start believing that your physical deterioration is actually purification. The tremors are your body shedding earthly limitations. The memory loss is making room for divine knowledge. The personality changes are your soul transforming into something higher. You have created a false framework. It transforms every symptom of poisoning into evidence of spiritual advancement. The most tragic part is how your deteriorating mental state proves every criticism of your work. Your neighbors already suspect your activities. They see your transformation into a trembling, paranoid wreck. This becomes proof that dabbling in unnatural arts leads to madness. The church uses your condition as evidence. They say pursuing forbidden knowledge brings divine punishment. You have become a living argument against the very field you devoted your life to advancing. Your work becomes increasingly dangerous as your judgment deteriorates. You mix chemicals without considering consequences. You heat volatile substances to dangerous temperatures. You handle toxic materials with reckless abandon. Your laboratory is a disaster waiting to happen. When it does happen, you will likely take half the neighborhood with you. The line between genius and madness has been destroyed by chemical poisoning. You still have moments of clarity, brief periods where you recognize how far you have fallen. But these only drive you deeper into despair. You know you are losing your mind, but you cannot stop the processes that are destroying it. Every day in your laboratory brings you closer to complete mental collapse, yet you cannot abandon the work that has become your identity. The understanding of mental illness in your time offers no help. Madness is either divine punishment for sin or demon possession, or it is an imbalance of the four body fluids that people believe control health. The idea that your symptoms are caused by the materials you work with every day is unthinkable. If you sought help, you would be treated with bloodletting and purges. These interventions would likely kill you faster than the mercury poisoning. You exist in a unique form of hell. You are aware enough to recognize your deterioration, but you are powerless to stop it. Your pursuit of the ultimate transformation has transformed you into something monstrous. You have become a cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession. The cruelest irony is that you still believe you are on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history, even as your mind crumbles around you. In your final clear moments, you sometimes wonder if this is the true transformation stone, not the changing of base metals into gold, but the transformation of a rational man into a madman, pursuing an impossible dream until it destroys him completely. The tragic reality is that your story is not unique. Across the continent, in similar laboratories hidden in cellars and towers, other practitioners are following the same path to destruction. They too have made it this far in their careers as secret metal changers. They too have breathed more toxic fumes than coal miners. They too have handled more deadly substances than plague doctors. They too have accumulated enough heavy metals in their bloodstreams to qualify as walking chemistry experiments. But here is the harsh truth about being a practitioner of this dangerous art in your time period. You do not retire. You do not write memoirs. You do not collect a pension. You simply stop showing up to the laboratory one day, usually because you are dead. People in your profession did not die peacefully in their beds, surrounded by loving family. They died spectacularly and painfully. They died in ways that would make modern poison experts weep. The irony is perfect. In your quest to discover the liquid of eternal life, you have created a perfect recipe for death. The most common cause of death among practitioners is poisoning from their own experiments. Remember all those times you casually handled mercury, lead, arsenic and antimony. Your body remembers too. These metals have been building up in your organs for years. They are slowly transforming you into a walking chemical disaster. Mercury poisoning is particularly delightful. The symptoms start subtly: trembling hands, memory loss, irritability. But as the metal builds up in your brain, things get interesting. You begin experiencing hallucinations and violent mood swings. You have fits of rage, your teeth fall out, your gums bleed constantly, your personality disintegrates into paranoid ravings. Some practitioners, driven mad by mercury poisoning, actually committed suicide. They chose death rather than endure the progressive destruction of their minds. The Mad Hatter from a famous children's story was not a whimsical character. He was based on real hat makers who used mercury in their trade. They literally went insane from the exposure. As a metal changer, you are getting doses that would make a hat maker look like a health enthusiast. Lead poisoning offers its own special brand of misery. Your bones ache constantly. Your stomach feels like it is being eaten from the inside. You develop what is called painter's colic. This is excruciating abdominal pain that makes you curl up in agony. Your blood pressure shoots up dangerously high. Your kidneys slowly shut down. Eventually you slip into a coma and die. Your body finally succumbs to the lead you have been absorbing for years. Arsenic, that favorite poison of your time, provides a more dramatic exit. The symptoms look like cholera or food poisoning. Even if someone suspects foul play, they might not realize you have been slowly poisoning yourself. You will experience violent vomiting, diarrhea, and dehydration. Your skin will develop a distinctive rash. Your hair will fall out in clumps. And then, mercifully, you will die. But poisoning is not the only workplace hazard. Laboratory explosions are surprisingly common. Remember, you are mixing volatile chemicals with no understanding of their actual properties. You are heating unknown substances over open flames. You are combining elements that really do not want to be combined. Sometimes your laboratory simply explodes. It takes you with it in a spectacular fireball. These explosions are not just dangerous to you, they are dangerous to everyone around you. Buildings in your time are made of wood and dried grass. One experimental mishap can burn down an entire city block. This is why practitioners are often forced to work in remote locations. They work far from populated areas. You are literally too dangerous to live in civilized society. The church presents another mortal threat. If your experiments are discovered, you might be accused of heresy or witchcraft. You might be accused of working with demons. The penalty for such accusations is usually death, often by burning at the stake. Ironically, you might end up dying in flames anyway, either from your own explosions or from the church's righteous fire. Some practitioners try to avoid persecution by working in secret, but this creates its own problems. You are isolated, paranoid, and often working alone. No one can help if something goes wrong. If you collapse from poisoning or are injured in an explosion, there is no one to find you. You simply die alone in your laboratory. You are surrounded by the very substances you thought would bring you eternal life. The statistics are grim. Modern chemists have an average life expectancy roughly equal to the general population, but practitioners of your time rarely lived past 40. Most died in their 30s, often after only a decade or two of practice. Compare this to modern chemistry professors. They routinely work into their 70s and 80s. You begin to understand just how deadly your chosen profession really is. Some famous practitioners met particularly colorful ends. Ramon Llull was a 13th century philosopher and metal changer from an island near Spain. He was supposedly stoned to death by an angry mob in North Africa. Whether this is true or legend, it shows the dangerous reputation practitioners carried. Basilius Valentinus, another renowned practitioner, allegedly died from antimony poisoning. He was killed by the very element he championed in his writings. The records are incomplete, of course. Many practitioners worked in secret. Their deaths went unrecorded. But the evidence we have suggests something disturbing. This pursuit was less a scholarly activity and more a slow-motion suicide mission. You were not just studying chemistry, you were volunteering for a multi-year experiment in creative ways to die. Even if you somehow survived the chemicals, the explosions, and the church, you still faced normal dangers of your time. Plague, war, famine, and simple infections could kill you just as easily as your laboratory. But at least those deaths would be quick. Death from your profession was usually a prolonged affair, a gradual poisoning that could take years to complete. The truly tragic part is that many practitioners knew they were dying. They could feel their bodies breaking down, their minds deteriorating, their strength failing, but they continued their work anyway. They were convinced that the next experiment would yield the breakthrough they sought. They literally worked themselves to death in pursuit of immortality. So as you feel your hands trembling from mercury exposure, remember this. As your stomach cramps from lead poisoning, as your hair falls out from arsenic absorption, remember this truth. You are not just practicing this dangerous art, you are participating in one of history's most elaborate forms of accidental suicide. Every day you survive is a small miracle. Every experiment you complete without dying is a victory against overwhelming odds. Your laboratory is not just a place of learning, it is a death trap. Your chemicals are not just tools, they are weapons pointed at your own body. Your quest for the transformation stone is not just ambitious, it is suicidal. Welcome to this profession, where the only thing more dangerous than failure is success. And now, as we step back from this harrowing tale and examine the broader picture, we must confront an uncomfortable truth. The story you have just heard represents the reality of countless individuals who pursued this dangerous art across centuries of human history. So there you have it, a glimpse into the life of a practitioner of the dangerous art of metal changing, still dreaming of becoming a wise wizard in a star-covered hat, still imagining brewing magical potions in a cozy tower laboratory, still picturing yourself as the scholarly sage, surrounded by bubbling containers and ancient books, on the verge of discovering the secrets of the universe. Think again. The reality was nothing like the romanticized version Hollywood has sold you. There were no wise old wizards with flowing beards and twinkling eyes. There were no magical laboratories filled with sparkling potions and mysterious vapors. There were no dramatic breakthroughs accompanied by triumphant music and golden light. Instead, there were desperate, poisoned, half-mad individuals. They worked in awful conditions with deadly materials they did not understand. They were not wise, they were deluded, they were not magical, they were toxic. They were not discovering the secrets of the universe. They were slowly killing themselves with their own ignorance. The practitioner of this art was not a wise wizard from fantasy stories. He was more like a drug cook with a library card, dangerous, desperate, and doomed. His laboratory was not a place of wonder and learning. It was a contaminated site, poisoned with heavy metals and reeking of sulfur. His great work was not the pursuit of knowledge. It was an elaborate form of accidental suicide. Why do we remember the myths instead of the poisoned corpses? Because the truth is too grim, too pathetic, too utterly devoid of romance. We want to believe in the wise practitioner because the alternative is too depressing. The alternative is acknowledging that brilliant minds wasted their lives. They pursued impossible dreams with deadly methods. This is too depressing to contemplate. The myth of the noble practitioner serves a purpose. It makes us feel better about human ambition, about the pursuit of knowledge, about the price of discovery. We tell ourselves that these men were pioneers. We say their failures paved the way for modern chemistry. We claim their deaths meant something. But here is the brutal truth. Most practitioners died for nothing. They did not advance science. They did not discover anything useful. They simply poisoned themselves while chasing fantasies. Their deaths were meaningless. Their sacrifices were pointless. Their legacy was non-existent. The real pioneers of chemistry came later. They were armed with better understanding, safer methods, and actual scientific principles. They built on centuries of accumulated knowledge. They did not build on the random experiments of mercury-addled individuals from centuries past. Modern chemistry owes more to 18th and 19th century scientists. It owes little to these earlier practitioners. So tonight, sit in your temperature-controlled home, drink clean water, and breathe unpolluted air. Take a moment to appreciate what you have. Modern safety regulations are not bureaucratic nonsense. They are the hard-won lessons of centuries of industrial accidents. Environmental protection agencies are not government overreach. They are the institutional memory of what happens when humans handle dangerous chemicals without proper oversight. Your local pharmacist is not a mysterious figure dispensing magical potions. They are a trained professional who understands drug interactions, proper doses, and safety protocols. Your doctor is not a barber surgeon with a rusty blade. They are a medical professional with years of education, modern equipment, and evidence-based treatments. The statistics tell the story. Practitioners of this art had a life expectancy of about 35 to 40 years. This assumes they survived childhood. Modern chemists live well into their 70s and 80s. Ancient practitioners worked alone, in secret, with no safety equipment or emergency protocols. Modern chemists work in teams, with oversight, wearing protective gear and following established procedures. Ancient practitioners poisoned themselves with mercury, lead, and arsenic. Modern chemists have safety data sheets, fume hoods, and hazmat protocols. Ancient practitioners died from their own experiments. Modern chemists retire with pensions and write memoirs. The transformation from ancient metal changing to modern chemistry was not just a scientific revolution, it was a triumph of human survival. We learned finally that the pursuit of knowledge does not require the sacrifice of the knowledgeable. We discovered that understanding the natural world does not demand we destroy ourselves in the process. But perhaps most importantly, we learned that the real magic is not in changing base metals into gold. It is in changing ignorance into knowledge, superstition into science, deadly curiosity into safe discovery. The true transformation stone is not a magical substance that grants immortality. It is the accumulated wisdom that helps us live longer, healthier, and more productive lives. So the next time you see a movie about a wise old practitioner discovering the secrets of the universe, remember the reality. Remember the poisoned corpses, the exploded laboratories, the mercury-maddened minds. Remember that real progress came not from chasing impossible dreams, it came from learning to ask better questions and find safer ways to answer them. The ancient practitioner was not a hero, he was a cautionary tale. His true legacy is not the knowledge he discovered. It is the hard-won wisdom that we should never again confuse suffering with scholarship, or dying with discovery. Welcome to the real world. Here the only magic is the magic of not poisoning yourself while trying to learn something new.